Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brett Sampson, and I'm a planning manager at Dorado County. I have about 20 plus years of experience in planning. I have worked on everything from general plans to specific plans to I'm very heavy in the California Environmental Quality Act, and I'm basically an environmental planner that has turned into an overall what I would call a utility planner. And I run the long-range planning unit over at the county. And really the only thing that matters in all of that is that I actually work for you. It's your taxpayer dollars that fund my salary and fund these projects, these community-led projects that we undertake. I don't work too much in the private developer projects. I'm much more of the community driven projects, like if it's a general plan update or if we're updating our zoning code or something like that where it's a community-led effort. So I really am honored to be here in front of my bosses and honored to be in front of the Sierra Renaissance Society. It's a fantastic turnout. And I just wanted to give a couple of kind of updates before I start the presentation that this group might be very interested in. And number one is the county has a new tool on our website. It's a project tool, and if you just go to our website at edc.gov and go on the planning website, you'll see a projects option. And we now have a projects map that shows all of kind of current projects going on in El Dorado County. So you can check out what's going on in your neighborhood. If you have a question about a project, what's going on with this project? Like, I thought it was going to be built and I have not seen it being built, or did this project get approved or not? You can go on the map, you can click on the project little icon that's on there, and it'll give you a narrative and an update of exactly what's going on with that project and where that project is at as of today. So definitely avail yourselves of that new resource. It is on the Planning Services website. It's right there front and center, and it's a fantastic resource, and we do update it regularly. Of course, if you ever have any questions about any projects, feel free to call the planning department. I also left some business cards at the table, so feel free to call me or email me, and I will certainly track down the answer for you. But if you want a quick update on what's going on with a certain project, just go to that map, click on the project, and it'll tell you hopefully everything you need to know. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew about that resource. The other thing to give an update is I'm going to be giving a presentation on the county's general plan, the overall guiding document of the county. But I wanted to make sure that this group was aware, since you are involved in your community, that we are talking about, and the Board of Supervisors is talking about, doing an update to our general plan. And so whether that would be a comprehensive update in every element section, or whether they would just want certain sections updated, that's yet to be determined. And when they want to conduct that update is yet to be determined. They have not given me the green light to move forward with an update, but I wanted to make sure that this group was aware that that is being talked about, and that could be coming up in the next year or so. And so this talk today is almost the first public meeting of that update. And so I wanted to make sure, since obviously all of you are involved in the community and are interested in these types of things and want to be civically engaged, that definitely stay tuned for that update. And when that does start, definitely participate. Make sure that your views are incorporated into that general plan update. Because of a lot about what you're about to hear in my presentation really stems from public participation and what the community wants and what you all think is good for the community. The general plan is that vision document. So I just wanted to give those two quick updates that definitely use our new tool. I love it. It's on the Planning Services website, and you can get a quick update on any project that you're interested in and just see, where it's at. So
How will the public know that there's starting this update of the general plan?
We would, there would be official notifications, and it would go into the newspaper. We would do Facebook blasts. We would do, it would be advertised for a Board of Supervisors meetings, for Planning Commission meetings, all of that sort of thing. And then once we started going on the update, there would be advertisement for public meetings and public input. But none of that, like I said, the Board of Supervisors has not given me the green light for that yet. Obviously, it's a big funding requirement that does come out of the general fund. That's your taxpayer money. And so that type of an effort is very expensive, and they're thinking about it right now. So, but once we do get the green light, there will be multiple methods of advertisement. Facebook, we'll be doing the newspaper, we'll be doing it'll be flashing across our website, that kind of a thing. So we'll do a full gambit, but that's also why it's fairly expensive. So, but stay tuned for that, because I am hearing from your elected officials that there might be an appetite to start an update on the general plan. So thank you so much for coming. I'm going to get started now. I'm here today to talk to you about a general plan overview and everything that goes into a general plan. And so, you know, what is a general plan? And really, a general plan is the overall vision and community-wide goals for a certain community. It's really a vision statement of where a community wants to go and how they want to grow and develop. And it really sets the table for what a community wants at the end of the day. If you see where development is happening or where it's not happening, that comes from the general plan, and that comes from land use designations in the general plan. And it also comes from statements of what is important in the general plan. It really is a blueprint for meeting the community's long-term needs. That is the general plan. It is a visionary document. It is fairly vague throughout until you get to implementation measures, and then those get fairly specific. But it is a visionary document. It's what a community thinks is important to them. So, and that's why it's so important when we do conduct a general plan update that the community participates and that all of you in this room certainly provide input on what's important to you. Okay. Well, each general plan has goals, and certainly in our general plan, you'll see a strong theme of the goal of keeping the rural character of El Dorado County intact. That is part of the vision statement in the general plan, but goals of the general plan include, but really aren't limited to, strong, diversified, and sustainable local economy, foster economic growth, foster a rural quality of life, retention of permanent open space and natural areas, improving a jobs to housing ratio. Housing is a huge topic in this day and age for sure. And really, it's a combination of growing in a responsible way and at the same time retaining our rural character. So these are the existing goals in the general plan, but certainly, you know, something to think about, something, you know, if we do go forward with an update, something to say, like, is our general plan missing a vision statement? Does it need something else? So really the goals of the general plan is a very visionary, where are we going to be in the next 20 years, or where are we going to be at build out of the general plan way on down the future. So there's a lot of things that go into a general plan. I mean, there is a ton of outreach. There's analysis, there's economic analysis, there's zoning ordinances and zoning that fall from a general plan. There's all sorts of economic analysis, and really, you know, it's a balance between economics and implementation. And so there are a lot of things that go into this comprehensive planning effort. It's not just a one-way street. It's a community-wide document, and so that includes everybody's point of view, what everybody would like to see. Some people are very strongly opinionated that the El Dorado County should be a zero-growth county. Some people are much more of the opinion that we need to foster more economic development. And so there is that balance between the needs of the entire community. But there are a lot of factors that go into that planning, and certainly one thing to key on is the zoning code is really, in a lot of cases, the implementation of that general plan. The end result of the general plan process is a zoning code that provides specifics on what uses are allowed on certain properties and what uses are not allowed on certain properties, what type of setbacks you have to have on certain types of properties. Is there a design review overlay on a certain property that means that you have to go to the Planning Commission to get permission to build what you want to build? So really all of that planning process does result in a nuts and bolts on the ground document, our zoning code, Title 130, which dictates uses and how those uses are built. Okay. So the components of our general plan, we have 9 elements, and they're listed up above, and really, I'll get into this in a little bit, but some are mandatory elements and some are not mandatory elements. Some are just what the community wanted to add. And I think in this case, the community has about 3 elements that are additional elements. And I just think that's incredibly impressive, especially for a rural county, to have not just the mandatory elements, but additional elements of what is important to the county. But our existing elements are safety and noise, land use, economic development, circulation and transportation, open space conservation, housing, parks and recreation, services and utilities, and agriculture and forestry. So those are our 9 elements. And obviously each element is issue-based. And then each element starts out with goals. There would be land use goals. One of those goals could be to provide a mix of land use types throughout the county. And then it would drop down to objectives as well. And then what's the objective of that goal? And then there would be policies and implementation measures that actually state how the county is going to implement and achieve that goal. So the general plan provides a full range of the 30,000 foot level all the way down to how do we implement this? And some of those implementation measures are just as easy as update the zoning code to reflect what we want. And so, the nuts and bolts of it get down to the implementation measures. And so each element has goals, then objectives, policies, and then at the end of the day, you'll see in the general plan, there'll be a list of implementation measures. Implementation measures that we as the county need to regularly audit, and we need to report back to the Board of Supervisors what measures have been completed and what measures have not been completed. And I have to tell you, sometimes that can be an embarrassing conversation of, there's some things that have been put on the shelf, some things where the elected officials have chosen not to implement something for a period of time due to financial constraints or just it isn't a priority in the moment. But all of those implementation measures are supposed to be monitored, and we do report back to the board on where each measure sits. And has it been implemented? Is it an ongoing measure? Is it something that we do annually? Is it something that we do every 5 years? Or is it something that we were supposed to do and we haven't done yet? And so it's kind of a red flag check for our elected officials to say, wait a minute, long-range planning manager, you said you were going to do this and this hasn't been done yet. How do we allocate funds for this? How do we make this happen? So when you do go through the general plan, certainly read all the way to the back of each one of these elements and see what the implementation measures are. That's the outcome of the goals, objectives, and policies of how do we implement this. And so the implementation measures are really the nuts and bolts of each general plan element. So I got into this a little bit before, but we do have state required elements, and then we also have county adopted elements. And obviously the two big elements in any general plan is the land use element and the transportation and circulation element. The land use element dictates what land uses occur in what areas. And a lot of that is determined by our transportation corridors. Where are major arterial roadways? Missouri Flat Road, major arterial. That's why we see a high level of dense development on Missouri Flat and quite a bit of commercial, quite a bit of fast food restaurants. So that is predicated on general plan land use designations along this corridor that are designated as commercial uses. And why did they get to that designation? Because it was a major travel area. And so you'll see that a lot of our commercial development, a lot of our industrial development is clustered around major roadways. So the land use element really does work in conjunction with the circulation element, and they really do work together. And those are really the two most heavy-handed elements in a general plan. And so also there's the housing element is a major element in the general plan. I wanted to update this group and let you all know that we did update our housing element. We now have a housing element that is good from 2021 to 2029. That's the span of time before you have to update it again. Unfortunately, many pieces of the general plan these days are dictated by the state. There's a lot of state mandates. One of those state mandates in the housing element was to allow for 30 units per acre on certain zone properties, on multifamily properties, when the county, our point of view, was that 24 units per acre was really kind of the maximum that what we wanted. And that there's a lot of constraints to building in El Dorado County. We have quite a bit of topography. We have streams, we have rivers, we have large oak trees. We have down the hill, we have rock outcrops with serpentine soils and serpentinite rock outcrops and asbestos. So, we do have a lot of constraints in this county. So that's one thing to keep in mind in the general plan is some things are state mandated. And the state does control our housing element. So we had to agree to 30 units per acre to get a certified housing element. So something to keep in mind is if we're conducting a general plan update or you're going through the general plan and say, wow, they say they want a real rural community and we were all on board with that, but then it says right here that it's 30 units per acre in certain zones that are multifamily zone properties. Doesn't that mean vertical construction in a lot of cases? It does in a lot of cases, and in this case, it was mandated to us by the state. So the state has gotten more and more involved in general plan policy and really in land use development as a whole. And certainly the county, the residents and county staff have really been trying to deal with that and navigate that and try to get as much of what we want as possible. But certainly something to keep in mind that some things that you see in the general plan weren't put there by public input. They were put there by the state government. And so unfortunate that we don't have full control over our document and over our visions, but we do have, to a certain degree, we do have a say-so. And I would say when getting back to our additional elements that we have in our general plan, that really shows that we have a specific identity that is ours and that we have things that we want to see. So the housing element, there's also public services, public health, and the conservation and open space element. We are updating our safety element right now. One of the triggers for that was when we updated our housing element, that put us on the clock by the state of California to then update our safety element. There's all sorts of rules that we have to comply with. So we are updating our safety element right now. It was very good timing though, because as we all know, the Caldor fire that was so devastating to our community hit, and part of the safety element analysis is to analyze evacuation routes, to put in place what the sheriff's office is doing, their local hazard mitigation plan, to try to ensure that subdivisions have 2 points of exit, not just one point of exit. We have a lot of single point roads in this county, and that can become very dangerous if there is a major event. So we are updating the safety element right now. So something to keep in mind, that we have an updated housing element and we're going to have an updated safety element. Okay. And really, this just gets back to what I was saying about this general plan is really our vision statement. It's really, it really solidifies our values and how we want to build a future and what we want that future to look like. So I'm just going to roll right into the actual elements. The land use element, as I spoke about before, is a major element in the general plan with the circulation element. And it really specifies the goals and really sets policy for how the distribution of land uses will occur in the county. And as I said, a lot of that is determined by our roadway network and where development has occurred in the past. But also it determines to what degree this growth can be accommodated while meeting other state and federal mandates. So it's, we've run into, and this crowd is probably well aware, is that the state has also given us some mandates on certain projects are allowed by right, and certain projects are ministerial instead of discretionary, where the county is put on a clock to approve the project, and if that project checks all the boxes that the state says that they have to check, then that project will be approved. So it's really that balance between what the community wants and what we feel is important, and also trying to navigate our larger state government and ensuring that we don't run afoul of state law, because the state will come after us if we are violating our general plan for certain. So, but the land use element really dictates what uses can happen where.
Does the state require us to build a certain number of units of low-income housing in our county per year, or?
They don't. What they do is they give us number projections of low-income housing that we have to have the potential to achieve, and we have to be working towards achieving that. And they are affordable housing numbers, and they are allocated to us through SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. And right now, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's 4,000 and change units that we have to working towards, and we are.
Year goal, would that have to be achieved?
It would be predicated, in my view, on the planning horizon of the general plan, and so a 20-year horizon or a build-out horizon of the general plan. But the state monitors your progress towards achieving those numbers, and right now the county is very much lacking in achieving our numbers for affordable housing. So the state is watching us closely, and it's a slippery slope because even affordable housing is development, and one of the vision statements in our general plan is we want a rural community, and so there is kind of a rub there. So, but we do show that we have the potential to achieve our affordable housing numbers from the state. We have enough land use designated land that would be designated for multifamily uses to show that we have the land capacity to reach that 4,000 unit number. Right now, I believe I don't know the exact number we're at right now, but it's very much under the 4,000. I think we're hovering around 900 to 1,000 units. Something in that area. So we have quite a ways to go, but we are making progress on those numbers, and we're hoping that the state understands that. But that's one of the reasons why the state implemented a law, Senate Bill 35, SB 35, which allows basically what I was talking about before, by right, projects that are affordable housing projects that are in a commercial or multifamily zone property, that it's allowed by right. So that's the state taking some land use control away from us. And they're taking some of that land use control away from us because we are lacking on achieving our affordable housing numbers. So that's how a law like SB 35 gets put on the books and is imposed upon us, is because in the state's view, and I'll be very clear on that, that's the state's view, not my view, and maybe not some of the view in this room, but that we need to do a better job at building affordable housing. So, and we need more affordable housing. So it's SB 35 was put in place to ensure a streamlined process for those types of projects, and that those projects are ministerial and not discretionary. So, and a huge catch with that is that that type of a project is exempt under CEQA. And so there's no large-scale environmental impact report that is done for that type of a project. It's exempt. And it's exempt because the governor has stated that it's exempt. So we do have obligations as far as affordable housing numbers. We do show that we have the ability to achieve those numbers, but we're achieving those numbers at a rate that would be considered too slow by the state. So we're kind of on, we're riding this fence of trying to comply, but then also trying to have some local control and local discretion over those projects. So it's a tough position to be in. There's a lot of state mandates that are coming our way, just like some things you see in the general plan. Some laws that we have to comply with when we're looking at a project. The county does not have a choice. It's dictated to us by the state. So
We're going to have rows of multi-story apartment buildings like they have on Bidwell that they're building going down the whole road.
I would hope not. What we're trying to do right now is put design standards in place to, if we are forced or if we are required to approve a project, that at least a project has to look a certain way and has to feel a certain way, and that would be dictated by input from the residents. Things like you have to use natural colors in the paint. You have to use rock and stone. You can't use corrugated metal reflected materials. You can't use fluorescent lights. You have to use more standard lighting, that kind of a thing. So we are trying to put design standards in place to help really, we wouldn't be able to stop a project or, even curtail a project, but we could at least have a say-so in how that project looks. But right now, if a project comes in and the land use designation is correct from the general plan and it's zoned multifamily residential and they have a certain amount of affordable housing that they're providing to the public, SB 35 takes effect. And so, at the end of the day, that project is probably going to be approved.
How much power does a historical overlay of a community have?
It has just what I was saying, like a design review overlay where a historic overlay at least would go through a design review. And during that process, the design review could ask for certain things from that project, how it looks, how it feels, how it functions, setbacks, all that kind of a thing. So a historic district overlay certainly gives the community more say. A design review overlay over a property as well gives the community more say. But we are, like I said, attempting to put in design standards across the county so that if a project does come in, no matter if it's in a historic district or if it's in a design review overlay area, if it's zoned commercial or multifamily, that they would have to comply with those design standards. So the county is taking action and spending quite a bit of resources to try to help navigate these state mandates. They are what they are, but at the end of the day, the county does have some things that we can do to ensure that rural character and to ensure that the vision that's in the general plan is upheld. So, but the affordable housing is a great question. We do have that potential, but we are not making the kind of progress the state would want to see. And so that's really the end result of that is a state mandate that comes down that says that, thou shalt approve these types of projects. So.
Would you please repeat the questions that people bring up?
Oh, absolutely. For this slide, and as far as the land use, and really pay attention to the graphic of that really does break down of land use designations are then divided into community regions, rural regions, planned communities, and rural centers. Each one of those is defined in the general plan of what each one of those communities or regions are supposed to look like and feel like. And then also, as you see in the very right-hand column, each one of those communities kind of has a different implementation measure or a different, this is what we're going to be. Go to the rural regions are the least impacted as far as development because in a lot of those regions it is agriculture and timber production. We're talking about the Apple Hill area coming all the way down. We're talking even down on the very south end of the county or the very west end of the county on the periphery of El Dorado Hills. So certainly those rural regions are the most rural area that we have, and of course the community regions are the most developed areas. But those are defined in our general plan, and the land use designations are consistent with those definitions. So you're not going to see in a rural region a large amount of commercial regional or commercial zoned land and or commercial regional zoned property, for like a shopping mall or something like that. So that's really the thing to key on, is that the land use designations in the zoning really needs to be consistent with those definitions for community regions, rural regions, planned communities, and rural centers. So it really all has to be consistent. And so the land use element really does dictate how we develop, and then really dictates what zoning falls from those land use designations. Every single property in El Dorado County has both a general plan land use designation and a zoning designation. The general plan land use designation, to give you an example, let's say it's a commercial land use designation. There'll be a definition of what types of uses would go in that commercial land use designation. Then there's the zoning that falls from that. And that zoning needs to be consistent with that commercial land use designation. So the zoning options in that area would be, it could be a community commercial zone property, so a very small commercial operation. It could go all the way up to a commercial regional zoning designation, which is more of like the back behind us where Target is and all of that. So that's a commercial regional shopping center. But the zoning and the land use designation from the general plan has to be consistent. And so we do cleanup exercises all the time where there was either a technical mistake made or a mapping error or a GIS error where somehow, some way, the zoning isn't consistent with the general plan designation. So we go to the board all the time with these cleanups and say, hey, this is a commercial zone property. It really can't have a residential 1 acre per unit designation on it. It really has to only have the commercial designation on it. So that's something to really keep in mind, is that every single property, the zoning designation needs to be consistent with the general plan land use designation, and that every parcel has both, and that they need to be consistent. And that's really how development is controlled in this county. And so if you have, let's say, a commercial land use designated property and you have a commercial zoned property, and let's say it does say community commercial on that zoning designation, you go to our zoning code and it gives you a list of uses that are allowed or not allowed in that zone. And so in our Title 130 zoning code, we have all uses that are allowed, like in a community commercial zone property. And something to keep in mind is if the table or the zoning code is silent on that type of use, if it's just not listed, you say, oh, well, it doesn't say that I can do such and such. More than likely that use isn't allowed. So if the zoning code is silent on that use, it's implied that it's not allowed on that property. So, but again, Many times my boss, the director of planning and building, has to make determinations on, oh, is that use consistent with this definition? Because our general plan is from 2004, and there are some uses that weren't contemplated in this general plan, and so we have to, a lot of times, one thing that's come up is, and it's been a real thorn in our side, is pickleball versus tennis. And you would have thought that they were very similar, and and it was a similar use. And we were going down the road of saying, hey, you know what? Our zoning code doesn't talk about pickleball because pickleball wasn't invented yet. And so now it's become very popular, and we're saying, well, you know what? Pickleball is basically like a court sport. It's like if you were going to play basketball outside, or tennis is another one. Well, lo and behold, pickleball apparently is fairly noisy, and it makes that sound off the racket. And so, to give you an example of making a consistency determination that is wrong, that is a prime example of thinking that it's close enough to this use, that it's on a court, it can be lighted, it can be not, it's the same surface, it uses a small net. What about the noise? So you really, when you're making these use determinations, you really have to think about everything and about how that use operates. And so that's a prime example of making a mistake. And I would say it's somebody making a mistake that is analyzing things at their desk and looking at the uses and thinking, oh, geez, we don't have this definition, but we don't need it because we have tennis in there. And that's loud too, but hey, it's a different racket, it's a different ball, and that is not the same use. So, the zoning table has the list of uses, but it's by no means all encompassing. And so the general rule for a zoning designation is if your use isn't listed in the table as an allowed use, it's not allowed. So it's a tough one, and it's something that county staff all the time has to try to analyze. Go ahead, ma'am.
I don't live in Diamond Springs, but we continue to hear about a large residential development coming to Diamond Springs. Can you speak to that?
You are probably talking about Dorado Oaks, and it is a subdivision map, and it's, I believe it goes, and I'm not the discretionary manager, so I don't know the nuts and bolts of every project, but I believe it goes from, it starts in El Dorado, I think, back behind Church Street, and goes off, it would be south of then Pleasant Valley, and I think it's around 400 homes is what I want.
It's in Diamond Springs behind Deb's Frosty.
I'm sorry, Deb's Frosty. Yeah, Deb's Frosty. And so I believe it's around 400 units. I believe that they are, and I'm really racking my brain here, I think that they're in the final EIR stage for that project. And so they are finalizing the environmental impact report that was done for that project. I believe it still has to go to the board for final approval if they're doing a final EIR. So, but I believe it does include 400 units. I do not believe that it's an affordable housing project. I believe that it's a full discretionary project where the board and the planning commission and the board has discretion over that. So certainly an opportunity to make your voice heard to the Board of Supervisors. They absolutely take those comments into account, whether someone's for a project or against a project. The old adage is true, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So always keep that in mind in this room, that even if you're a single person coming to the board and stating that you're for or against a project, I have seen personally so many times a project be denied or approved in large part based on individuals' comments that are affected by the project. The Board of Supervisors takes that into account. They absolutely care about the community's comments and what you want, and they care about the visionary statements in the general plan about retaining our rural character. So, but I believe that's Dorado Oaks. I don't believe that it's fully approved. I think they're doing a final EIR now. But certainly at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned going on the planning website. We have a projects map app now, and so you can just start clicking on icons that are in Diamond Springs and El Dorado, and you can see where those projects are right now, and you can see whether they're approved or whether they're pending. And certainly if the project isn't approved, there's always time to say something.
Well, I just wondered what kind of impact it's going to have on traffic patterns. 400 homes, that's probably 800 cars,
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's an extensive traffic study, and I'm not sure what the analysis in that traffic study said or what improvements that they will be required to make. I'm sure with that amount of units that there's some type of traffic improvements that will be necessary, but I don't know the specifics of that. But you're right, with 400 units, there would be some level of traffic impact in that area. But again, that project would be analyzed not only per our general plan, but also per CEQA. And so our general plan has a required level of service in it, and then CEQA has what's called vehicle miles traveled. And so, vehicle miles traveled is intended to lessen the amount that people are traveling. So a project gets credit or benefit if you're close to, multimodal transportation. If you provide for like a bus stop as part of your project, things like that get you credit for vehicle miles traveled. But a project like that would have to look at not only vehicle miles traveled for everybody on that project, and that would be a CEQA impact, but per our general plan, they also have to look at the level of service at affected intersections. Go ahead.
Well, this might be the time to also ask about the recent Supreme Court of El Dorado County with the sheets.
Yep, the Sheets case, yes.
Can you repeat the question, sir?
Yes.
What was that?
Repeat the question, please.
can't hear the question.
Oh, she said, please define CEQA. CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act, and it's what every discretionary project or anything that qualifies as a project in California must be analyzed per CEQA. And it's a very extensive process. It includes a lot of analysis, traffic impacts, air quality impacts, noise impacts, tribal resource impacts, cultural, historical impacts, all of that. So CEQA is something that if you are a defined project, it is a very substantial analysis, and you are required to mitigate impacts to the furthest extent feasible. And as we all know, at the end of the day, a court or a judge will decide on what is meant by furthest extent feasible. So, at what level is a development required to lessen that impact? So CEQA was very, very robust, and that's why it's difficult with a law like SB 35 that makes certain projects exempt from CEQA. So it's very difficult at that point for a large-scale development to say the state is saying that this is exempt from CEQA. So the county still requires analysis, like a very large project that came in. If it was an SB 35 project, we would still require a traffic study. We would still require that be looked at, but it wouldn't be through CEQA. So.
She had asked about the sheets.
Oh yeah, the Sheets. There was a question here about the Sheets case, about our traffic impact fee through the county. And sorry, what was the question again?
Well, I just wondered how that affects the whole county planning, if it does.
So the question is how does that Sheets case or that court case affect the county and our operations? For right now, it doesn't affect us at all, but the Supreme Court did kick it back to the lower court, and they did say that the previous court cases of Nolan and Dolan are applicable to this Sheets case, and so the lower court needs to take a look at that. And so, the county has this traffic impact fee, and the county did an extensive nexus study to look at, what is, the right level of fee for the right size development. And so, long story short, we don't know the outcome of that yet because it was kicked back to the lower court. But at the end of the day, the traffic impact fee will either stay in place, and we have other impact fees as well. We have an ecological preserve impact fee if you're impacting lands that are down in the BLM eco preserve areas of Pine Hill Preserve, and you're in those surrounding areas. We have an impact fee for that as well. So we do have quite a few different kinds of impact fees. So if for some reason the courts decide that, hey, these types of impact fees are not legal, then the county and the county operations would have a serious issue of our ability to function. Yeah. So, but nothing has been decided yet. The Supreme Court kicked it back down to a lower court and said, hey, you need to look at these other two cases and see if your impact fee basically passes the test of, as I understand it, and I'm not an attorney, that the impact fee has to be proportional to the size of the development that you're proposing. And so, at the end of the day, with that Sheets case, it comes down to, was the fee proportional for building that single family home? And so, or is it not? So, but the courts will decide that, and whatever the outcome is, the county will have to deal with it. So, yeah. All right. I'm just gonna. Okay. I've talked quite a bit about transportation and circulation, but, the element supports development within existing communities. So as I said, the transportation and circulation element goes hand in hand with the land use element. You really can't have one without the other, so to speak. Clustered communities are mechanisms to reduce development pressure in rural areas, thus preserving the county's rural character and maintaining a sense of place within the communities. So clustered communities are certainly part of the general plan. It was part of the community regions, rural regions that I already spoke about, of where development is to be clustered in a certain way throughout the county. Also, promoting business and industry and having well-balanced communities will afford residents the opportunity to work, shop, recreate close to where they live, and in some instances take advantage of non-automobile oriented transportation methods. So exactly the very large transit stop or bus stop that we have out in front of Walmart is certainly a goal of our transportation element in our general plan, is to have access to multimodal transportation and not to be cut off. And so it's definitely a balance there of trying to provide those services and provide them in a spread out manner so that people can access non-vehicular transportation. So. The housing element, as I said, the housing element is new. Much of it is state mandated, but the housing element does really take a look at affordable housing and promoting affordable housing and trying to incentivize affordable housing. So we're trying to make it so where it's not being mandated on us, but we're the driver, and that we're promoting it, and that we're getting the types of affordable housing projects that we want as a community. We also, in the housing element, it really goes into, multi-use housing or mixed-use developments where the housing and the retail or the commercial is combined. Some people call it live-work. A perfect example is downtown Placerville, of where there's some residences up above where the shops are below. So the housing element really takes a look at all of that and provides for implementation measures to promote affordable housing. One of the implementation measures in the housing element is that the county is supposed to put together an inclusionary housing ordinance, which we're now calling our affordable housing ordinance. And so that ordinance is being prepared now. It's an implementation measure in the housing element. And so at the end of the day, we might provide some incentives to building affordable housing. We might provide, right now we provide a traffic impact fee waiver if you have affordable housing. And I'm talking deed restricted affordable housing, where the developer is going on the line and saying, I'm deed restricting these at a lower rent or a lower cost for a certain amount of years. So the housing element really gets into that, and really the objective of that housing element is to put the community in the driver's seat for affordable housing and those types of uses, and to really set the table so that it's not just all state mandates that are falling on us, that we get a say-so. Go ahead, sir.
How is affordable housing defined these days?
Well, our affordable housing task force that we just formed is going to be looking at exactly that. But, you know, it goes from everything from requiring new developers that come in. Let's say let's say the Dorado Oaks project that we were talking about earlier, where an affordable housing ordinance could, to promote affordable housing, require that a development that comes in that is, say, over 100 units provides a certain percentage of affordable housing as part of their development. And so it's a requirement on them that it can't be all market rate houses and or apartments. There would be, let's say, a 10% requirement to provide it. So there could be requirements. There could also be a fee that the county imposes on developments that come in that are larger scale. If you don't want to provide the housing yourself, that you can pay a fee, and then the county will work with affordable housing developers to then will use those fees collected to build affordable housing. So there's the requirement aspect of, you know, supporting affordable housing, but then there's also incentives. None of these incentives exist in the county right now, but incentives could include, well, if you have an affordable housing project that comes in, we're going to waive your building permit fee. We're going to reduce your parking standards that you have to have, because an affordable housing project doesn't require as many parking spaces as a market rate product. So there would be also possibly incentives. Then there's the far right bookend of subsidizing affordable housing. And so that could include tax abatements to where an affordable housing project isn't paying property tax up to a certain amount of years to help make them, you know, financially stable. Subsidies are very difficult because it's taxpayer money at the end of the day that's going to a specific project. So I'm not sure if that would be for El Dorado County or not, but really incentivizing affordable housing goes all the way from putting in requirements to produce affordable housing all the way to helping subsidize affordable housing.
Does the state provide all the subsidies?
The question was, does the state provide a lot of subsidies? The state in the recent past, has provided quite a bit of grant opportunities. The county has partnered with some charitable companies that build affordable housing so that we go for that grant money. So there are grant opportunities. So the state and the federal government do provide subsidies themselves. I guess you could call that a subsidy if it's a grant. And that's what most of these affordable housing projects have, is they have multiple streams of grant money that they've qualified for. And so that isn't county money, that isn't a burden on the county taxpayer, but it's state and it's federal. So yes, they do go for grants quite a bit.
So I don't understand what the affordable part of it is. I mean, affordable to who, or what are
the state or the housing, the state housing authority defines it, and they have right on their website a table that has what is deemed very low income, what is deemed low income, and then moderate income, and then higher or market rate income. So to qualify for that housing, your income level is at a certain prescribed rate. So the state determines what that is. And you have to adhere to that to get any kind of grant money or anything, any kind of subsidy from the state. But that is defined by the state, and it's defined by income level.
It's always changing.
And it's always changing. Yeah, and that's why it's very important to check in with the state before you make any moves at all to see where does this sit right now. So that's a great question. Okay. This is a little confusing graphic, but I like it just because this was done as part of the housing element update, and we did some surveys out to the public. And really the one thing to take from this slide is that 82% of respondents to the survey said that there's really not enough housing options in El Dorado County. I was shocked. No, but but 82% is about as significant as you can get in any kind of survey. So everybody surveyed really seemed to think that, hey, we need more housing options. And that doesn't mean that they necessarily thought like, oh, we need just affordable housing, but all types of products, apartments, townhouses, single-family residents, that the housing options in El Dorado County are limited. So I just wanted to include this graphic to really state that, this was one of the driving forces of when we did the housing element update, to put in policies to try to achieve a mix of housing uses. And one of the big things that's coming out of this is accessory dwelling units. And accessory dwelling units are virtually allowed by right now by the state on most parcels, unless it's a health and safety issue. And so we have a accessory dwelling unit ordinance that really codifies that and allows for people to build accessory dwelling units. And there aren't a lot of restrictions on it. Because the site, in theory, the site's already developed with a single family residence. It's one smaller unit that goes with it. The state says that it's allowed by right. So we do have an ordinance that allows for accessory dwelling units. And really that was an outcome of the housing element update, is to do that ordinance and put that in place to provide for a better mix of housing. And so that it's not just all large single family homes. So.
Is there a restriction on size for an ADU?
The question is there a restriction on size for an ADU? There is, and I believe it is 1,600 square feet. I believe, yeah. It's actually, it's less restrictive than the state. So that's in one instance where we're actually less restrictive. Because there was a big want in doing the housing element update for accessory dwelling units. There's, everything from having a family member that you need to take care of to, using it as a rental to help supplement your income. There's so many benefits that can be from an accessory dwelling unit. And, like I said, in theory, it's on a property that is already developed with a single family residence. So it seemed to be a good option for the county. And this survey, certainly people were pushing for accessory dwelling units. So, okay. Public services, well, I'll call this the boring element, but it really just includes all of our public services, and it really is the element is in there to provide and maintain a system of safe, adequate, and cost-effective public utilities and services. And so everything really goes into this to try to promote a healthy community. Certainly police protection is key. Certainly school facilities, access to clean water. The county water agency, in conjunction with EID, providing safe drinking water. So the public services and utilities element really lays out the requirement that services be provided in an adequate and safe manner. And so there will be, just like the other elements, there'll be goals in there, and then it'll go all the way to the implementation measure of saying that a project will be evaluated to have enough police coverage for that project. That where a certain project won't be taking away too much of our sheriff's department's resources. And if it does, then that development needs to provide and supplement the sheriff's office to provide those services. You typically only run into that type of a situation on a very large project, a project that is, hundreds of units in size, but it's a requirement that adequate services be provided. It's also a requirement of CEQA as well. That includes water. Yeah, it's water availability is a CEQA issue, and it's also a general plan issue. And so many times for these larger scale projects, our largest service provider in the county is the El Dorado Irrigation District. And so what is required is an analysis of a project and a statement from EID that they have adequate services to supply water. And they're required to analyze their water availability or going into the future as part of their water master plan, which is basically their version of their general plan. And so their water master plan really has to take a look at their permitting rights of how much water they can get a hold of and how much water is needed and needs to be supplied. So, and they are also audited by the state as well to ensure that those numbers are factually correct. So, but that is, water supply is certainly a factor in that, and it's also a CEQA impact area. And so if you are plugging into a water service provider as part of your project, you need to show that there's adequate water to serve your project, not only now, but in the future as well. If you're on a private, if it's a much smaller scale development and it's a private well, I believe you still need to show that through pumping records on a well that there's adequate water. But that's not a CEQA-related issue. That's typically where we're issuing a building permit and somebody is installing a well for their house. And so, but they still need to prove that that well will function over time. So, but water supply is a huge issue. It's a huge issue in this county. But under CEQA, you are required to answer that question: is there adequate water supply? The safety element is, like I said, is we are updating it right now. Much of the updating in the safety element is in regards to wildland fires. It's in regards to ensuring safe evacuation of areas. It's also state mandated through the board of, through CAL FIRE and their board of forestry. They review our safety element, and they just reviewed our safety element. And the word back that we're getting is that our safety element is going to be really the prototype and the gold standard for the rest of the counties in the state. And so we're one of the first to get a very modern new safety element that has gone through the channels. And much of it is state mandated, but as we all found out in the Caldor fire, the safety element was absolutely due a very significant update. And much of the update is in regards to wildland preparedness and evacuations. And the safety element is also saying that we're going to implement a defensible space ordinance. So, you know, property owners maintaining their property is going to be much more of a big thing going into the future, and ensuring that there aren't large piles of debris or fuels on the ground that are in close proximity to structures. But that defensible space ordinance is being prepared right now, and certainly I think there's opportunities for public input on that right now because it's being prepared. Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding the changes in the high-risk fire zones, particularly with Dorado Oaks, they have an environmental impact that didn't include that change in the high fire hazard district. So is there an expiration for environmental impact issues like that, or because
I don't know the specific circumstances of Dorado Oaks, but from what I know from CEQA and from environmental law is that you go with the information that is available at the time that you release the notice of preparation for the project. So
it's been like
that,
20 years that this project
yeah, well,
has been.
there must have been a determination, either they're doing a fire safe plan now, or there was a determination made that they didn't need to do one because they were operating off of the old maps.
What do they need to do now to update it to the current situation?
I don't believe they do if they use the information during the time of the notice of preparation. Yeah, it's very difficult on technical information because at some point you have to move forward with what you have, and things change all the time. And so I'm not an environmental attorney, but I believe that the snapshot in time is when you say we're going to prepare the CIR. And so that would have been at the time they released the notice of preparation, whenever that was. Now, maybe if they released the notice of preparation like long time ago, that is maybe a comment to make to the powers that be that like, hey, the notice of preparation was done, I don't know when it was done, but let's say it was a decade ago, and things have changed now. I want you to force them to go look at a fire safe plan. I will say I think that even if a fire safe plan wasn't specifically required for that project, and I'm not sure if it was or not, but certainly per CEQA, you would have to look at the circulation of the project and ensure that it was adequate and safe, and that the fire department and the sheriff's department review those environmental impact reports, and they provide input on safety issues such as wildland fires. So,
Current status.
on the current, they would be providing comments on their current view of the world, yeah. So, but per CEQA, I believe it's still the case. It's the notice of preparation is kind of the starting gun for a project, and you're required to use the information at that time. And so, but certainly, if there's chances for input on that project, make your views known, because as I said, the board really cares about those opinions and they will listen to you. Yeah. Okay. Noise, my favorite one. Is that pickleball? That is pickleball. Oh, good old pickleball. Noise has become a huge issue, and certainly the noise element of the general plan, makes requirements, or certainly for construction and then for operation of uses. And what that boils down to is noise requirements that are located in our zoning code. And so there's a required noise level at a property line depending on what the use is. And so when a project comes in, they are evaluated, and noise experts can run noise models, and they'll know what the use is, and they will plug in, okay, the use is occurring here, so a pickleball is occurring here, and then it's X amount of distance to the nearest property line that is a residence, and is that use going to be in compliance with the noise levels that are depicted in the zoning code? So discretionary projects are required to analyze that, and they're required to ensure that there's not a significant violation of the zoning of the noise ordinance at the property line. So pickleball is definitely one that has really triggered that again, and I would see if we do update the general plan in the near future, I'm sure that the noise element will be one that is looked at for an update. Because we certainly get complaints all the time about noise generating uses. Go ahead, ma'am.
So this is in the city of Placerville, but it's at Lions Park. They put in a new pickleball court. So I'm assuming at this point that they had to look at the zoning within the city of Placerville, and because the houses were already there, the park was already there, but now we have a new pickleball court. So how does that work when something comes in sort of after the fact?
I'm not sure exactly what the zoning code for the city of Placerville says, but just to give you an example of the county, and I'll just say it, the county is not subject to its own zoning code. So if it were a county park or a city park, city-owned property, I don't think they were technically, had to comply with their own noise ordinance. Should they? Yes. To give you an example, and I'm sure that this, I'm sure many of you were concerned about the Diamond Springs Park that will be coming in the future. We weren't required to, adhere to our zoning code in a lot of those instances as far as impacts, lighting, noise, all of that. But we simply acted as if we were a private developer, and we did everything as if we were. Call it passing the straight face test. Like, not rules for thee and not for me. So, but I'm not sure with the city of Placerville, but a lot of jurisdictions aren't subject to their own zoning code because, a lot of jurisdictions have community projects that are deemed to be a benefit to the community. And so it's almost like an override situation. I'm not saying this is the case as far as that pickleball court. They might have looked at it and they might have analyzed it, and it might have come back as not an impact per their noise ordinance. So they might very well have looked at it and said, well, it's not violating the ordinance at the property line. So either they did analyze it and it was deemed not an impact, or they made the fundamental decision that this does not apply to us because it's a public project. So, and that's something to keep in mind, is that there is something at the beginning of our zoning code for the county that says that we're exempt from it. So, but again, that's why community input matters and counts, because of the community input that we get, and because our board really does listen to the community, we don't typically apply different rules to ourselves. So we act as if we're just somebody that came in off the street and we want to do a project, and we do everything that anybody else would have to do. And we really make sure that everything is across the line as if we were a private entity. It's just a good way to do business. So, but I don't know what specifically happened with that pickleball court. They either analyzed it and said it's not a big deal, or they didn't. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, good old pickleball. There it is. And then there's the conservation and open space element, and that really, comes into play for us because of the environment that we live in. I mean, we live in a beautiful area. We have creeks and rivers and Lake Tahoe and, everything in between. We're in an absolute outdoor paradise. I've lived here for 20 years, and I got to tell you, I've done a lot of traveling around the state and around the country, and we have it really, as you all know, we have it really good here. So the conservation and open space easement element is really, put in place to ensure that vision statement of a rural county, it can be achieved. And so there's goals and policies in the conservation and open space element to really promote conservation of our open space. Very rarely would somebody be able to come in to this county and be able to rezone or change a land use designation away from open space to something else. That would be a discretionary project. That would go to our decision makers, and many times our decision makers would say, no thank you. So our conservation open space element is critical to really conserving our open space and ensuring that it's treated as its own resource. Many other jurisdictions have it as part of the land use element. It's a subsection of the land use element. Not in this county. It's its own separate element, and it is considered just as important as all of the rest. So. And that really rolls into to really, highlight it, is we also have a separate agriculture and forestry element. And so that's one that isn't required by the state, but that we include. And we include it because in the past we had a huge forestry industry, and that forestry industry has declined over time. But certainly our agriculture industry and everything from grapes and wine to row crops to orchards to all of Apple Hill, our agriculture and forestry element really solidifies that is important to us. And there is implementation measures in that element that really specify that agriculture and forestry takes precedent over other types of uses. And so again, that kind of falls back to if somebody wanted to rezone or change a land use designation and they wanted to change it from agriculture, an agriculture zoned property, to, let's say, a residential subdivision, that would probably not be approved in this county, because you would have to go back, and as part of that project in front of the Board of Supervisors, you would have to make general plan consistency findings. And those findings would have to address agriculture impacts. And so at the end of the day, the outcome would probably be this project isn't consistent with the general plan, because the general plan includes a policy that says that agriculture is a prime use in the county. And so having its own element and its own policies and implementation measures really helps to protect agriculture and forestry. Obviously, forestry has become less and less just because of more of things outside of the control of the county. Getting a timber harvest plan approved by the state is fairly difficult and it's expensive. And so for the most part, forestry in this county is conducted by basically one private company. And so it's a kind of a difficult task, but it in this county it is considered an important resource. And it's an important resource because it is definitely directly connected to all of our outdoor recreational opportunities. So the agriculture and forestry element is one that isn't required by the state, but the community ensured that it was put in place. In good old parks and recreation, we kind of got into this with the Diamond Springs Park, but this element certainly really wants to provide a diverse range of recreational opportunities at a regional, community, and neighborhood level. And so certainly we don't have very many regional parks in this area. There's some regional parks down at El Dorado Hills in Cameron Park, but certainly this element wants to provide for a mix of those opportunities and a mix of those types of facilities. And so there's goals and policies and implementation measures in that element that really promote the building of parks. And so that would be one where if a project came in and they weren't providing any parks at all, when they got to the review by the decision makers and getting through that general plan consistency finding, that might be difficult for a project if they weren't providing any kind of recreational opportunities, because you'd say, well, this project isn't consistent with our general plan. You're supposed to provide for these opportunities. Sir, was there a question in the back? Go ahead.
Yes. Did the current transition from the Texas Hill water storage project to residential development project area, which is fairly good size, did that require substantial zoning ordinance changes?
It is that project is just being undertaken. It is a county. It is not a private developer project. It is a county project. The notice of preparation and CEQA has just started on it. And what that project entails is that reservoir was contemplated in the original general plan. And there's what's called a take line shown on a map of where that future reservoir might be. And unfortunately, there's a bunch of people that live up there that have houses that were legally built houses because they got building permits, but now because there's an inconsistency with the general plan and their zoning, they can't get any kind of building permits for anything else, like a shed or a garage or a pool or anything that would be accessory to that dwelling unit. So it's a inconsistency that project is aimed to take that away so that those property owners have the same rights as the surrounding property owners. But it does not involve any type of tentative subdivision map. It's only existing parcels. It does not involve a private developer. About half of the parcels are owned by EID, the exact reservoir footprint, and then there's some periphery private owners that are affected as well. So the intent of that project is to do a general plan amendment to take that take line out of the map and then do a zoning consistency analysis and make sure that the zoning for those existing houses and properties are consistent with the surrounding zoning. And I looked at the map the other day, and it seems like RE5 is the zoning that they're basically going to, which would be 1 unit per 5 acres. That's what all the other homeowners up there have. But it's not a private developer project, and it's a county project because the county has an inconsistency on its hands between what the general plan says and what the zoning is. And so it's basically I would deem it a cleanup effort. But it does not involve any type of, tentative subdivision map with new lot. It doesn't involve any new lots. It's only existing lots. And so the homeowners up there have been very upset because they can't get a building permit for anything else, like a shed or a in-ground pool or anything like that, with that take line existing. So, yeah.
Is EID going to continue ownership of those properties?
I don't know. They own those properties. They could surplus them in the future. They might not. They might hold on as an investment on behalf of their ratepayers. You know, land typically only goes up, and if the take line is removed, that those parcels it might be more valuable in the future, but I have no idea what their plans are in the near future. I just know that they believe that they don't need a reservoir there for various reasons.
So this change is only going to affect the overlay of a reservoir in that area?
Well, there will not be a. Well, it'll all be residential as it is now. But the thing is you have residential zoning or even open space zoning, and then you have a reservoir slapped over the top of it. And so there's that inconsistency of, there's people that live out there now, and they have this constraint on them of this, you know, future conceptual reservoir.
So there's no other thing that's going to affect the community as far as that land?
I don't think, no. I don't think so. I mean, those would be individual parcels, you know, so, and they would be zoned at that point RE5, I believe. So it wouldn't be conducive to a lot of other uses. You would have to put 1 unit per 5 acres on it. And a lot of those, the lots aren't even the 5 acres. So they would just have 1 residence on it, and they wouldn't be able to then subdivide it beyond that because they're already at the below the minimum.
And owned by EID?
The EID parcels, yeah, they, you know, I don't believe there's houses on those parcels, so theoretically in the future there could be houses on those parcels, but that's if EID goes to sell. And like I said, I'm not sure what their plans are with it. I do know that they're very sure that they don't need a reservoir there in the future, and that this was done, you know, a long time ago, and they're like, well, okay, all of these people are very upset, and we don't need it, so let's get rid of it, and let's, you know, allow for them to have the same land use rights that their neighbors have. So it was an arbitrary line, and it was a map exercise at the time, and unfortunately a lot of times there's ramifications to a map exercise. And so they were very constrained up there in that area. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I have a question about CEQA. We were talking about the state telling us what to do. For CEQA, how did Dorado County, did we choose to be in CEQA, or was there a line drawn that put us in? And do they have the power to tell us what to do in our county?
That's a very good question, and a fairly complicated question. I believe originally we would have opted to participate originally. I think there was a long period of time where we weren't participating with SACOG, but I believe now it is basically mandatory, and it's mandatory because SACOG allocates the affordable housing requirements for each jurisdiction around it. So really, in my mind, it comes down to SACOG is the entity that gives us our allocation or our requirement of how many affordable housing units we need to provide. And so that's kind of the connection there. We don't participate in the past quite a bit with SACOG. You know, past board of supervisors have not been fans of SACOG, to say the least. And so, you know, it's one of those things where it's an agency that's telling us what the requirements are, and we certainly try to achieve that and try to work towards that, to not run afoul of the state. But I believe it's a requirement per they're allocating those affordable housing units to us.
So does El Dorado County have say, like a board, were there a board member?
I believe one of our board members acts as one of their strategic members of their council. I'm not sure the board member, but I believe we do have somebody that acts as that liaison. That's an elected official. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
That's what I wondered, the fairly controversial Deer Valley indigenous housing, is that mandated by the state, and the county really has nothing to say, or if the county doesn't choose that, I've heard that the county loses a lot of money.
Repeat the question, please.
The question was in relation to the Tribal Deer Valley project. I believe it's a treatment center that's out on near Green Valley Road that's behind, yeah. That is yet to be determined. That is something that the county, that we are looking at right now on what our rights are. So I don't want to get into too much detail, but we've certainly been hearing from the community. And like I said, when the community speaks, we listen, and we're vetting our options on that right now. So, but it would be, typically something like that would be allowed by right in a lot of cases. We're trying to ensure, is this one of those cases? So we have, let's just say, a lot of people involved, and we're taking a hard look at it for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm interested in the Rasmussen Pond project,
Mm-hmm.
the Cameron Meadows,
Mm-hmm.
and the people who were involved with it got a notification from the county that it was all put on hold. And then, about a week later, we got another notification saying that that was not true. Do you have any insight as to what's going on?
I don't have the particulars of that project because I'm not the discretionary planning manager, but I believe that project is drafting an EIR right now. And as far as I understand it, it's in the administrative draft stage. I don't think it's been made public yet, but I believe that project is moving forward. I would certainly go on our planning services website, go on the map, and get an update on that project specifically, so I'm not speaking out of turn. But I don't believe it's on hold. But the way these development projects, happen, and with a lot of times a developer with their funding sources and everything else that they have going on, a project will be on hold, then it'll move forward, then it'll be on hold, then it'll move forward. So it could be on hold, and I just don't know.
We did have a meeting down there. I think they called it a scoping meeting.
So it would have been a notice of preparation scoping meeting, so the start of the CEQA process.
150 people came
Yep,
to
right.
express their displeasure.
Right.
And I don't know if you guys were listening.
Well, we do have to process a project. We can't, as the county, say, because the community's upset, we're putting a hold on your project. We don't legally have that option. We have to bring a project forward and check the boxes and do the correct steps, and then allow the decision makers that opportunity. And there's public input. If that was the notice of preparation meeting, there will also be, I'm sure, a public comment meeting for the EIR, and then there will be also probably, I'm assuming, the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors as well. So there'll be multiple opportunities to provide input, but all we can do at that point is take the comments and make sure that everything's documented, and make sure that, let's say in the notice of preparation meeting, you said, hey, I think you need to look at traffic impacts at this intersection. That's incredibly valuable information to the county staff and whatever consultants are preparing the EIR to ensure that intersection is looked at. So it's a scoping meeting on the extent of the EIR and what is going to be looked at. But we can't, as county staff, we can't have personal opinions about a project. We have to process it. We can't put a project on hold or say, hey, there's obviously a ton of people that are against this project. Like, let's just put it on hold. We're not allowed to do that. We have to move it forward and just make sure that everything's done the right way, so that the decision makers can make an informed decision. And part of that informed decision will be all of the comments that are received. And so that NOP scoping meeting is very critical to document all of those comments and ensure that that's made part of the record. And so it's, don't think that it's going on deaf ears. It's the decision makers definitely listen to that. We as staff, we're supposed to be right down the line, right in the middle, and make sure that the process steps are correct. All right. More parks and recreation. Really, as I said before, this element really ensures that large-scale projects that come in will provide recreational opportunities, that the broad scope of recreational opportunities are provided in the county. We have a great trail system here that was, a lot of it was part of the old historic railroad. A lot of it, trails are in relation to old paths or even Pony Express Trail and all those kinds of things. And so this element really provides goals and objectives and implementation measures to ensure that our existing parks and recreational facilities are maintained and protected, and that new development that comes in is supposed to provide those facilities as well. Economic development. This is another one that is, not necessarily required by the state, but that we have in this county. And certainly, I think that element is, exists to ensure that we grow in a reasonable way, that business and the economy is a factor, and it's really just pairing with our rural character and economic development. And certainly, a lot of times those can butt heads. And sometimes those can complement each other. But this county, we do have our own economic development element, and really one of the prime goals of that is to ensure that we are promoting business in this county, and that we do grow business, and that if you are a new business owner, that you have opportunities, that you have places to put a business, that if you're in the correct land use designation, that if you're in the correct zoning, and if you're in the right spot, that you'll be able to really grow your business. So the economic development element is not one that's required by the state, but it's one, again, that when the general plan was formed, it was important to the community. And certainly it's, I think, indicative of everybody has different viewpoints, and a general plan is intended to encompass all of those viewpoints and to ensure that everybody's preferences and their viewpoints are depicted. So the economic development element is certainly an additional element, and certainly when this general plan was formed, it was obviously decided that it was important, and it's been in place since 2004. So certainly, if everyone wants to take a look at the link there, our general plan is always online. You can always look it up. Certainly, if you're ever providing comments on a specific project, and I'm going to tell you, we're inside the locker room now, and I'm going to tell you, like, the best way to get your comments heard is, in many times, really send us information directly out of the general plan. If you either like a project or don't like a project, say, oh, this is a great project because it's consistent with this general plan policy. This is fantastic. You guys are doing what you should be doing. Or conversely, here's this general plan policy. This project is totally inconsistent with this general plan policy. Because each one of these discretionary projects has to make consistency findings. And so really go on the website, look at the general plan, look at the elements, and certainly if you're providing comments on a project, provide it in a way that is specific to the general plan. And it's very difficult for a private developer to ignore anything like that, because they have to make those consistency findings. The other thing to do is, certainly, if you're making comments on a project, make it specific to the environmental impact report or the mitigated negative declaration that's prepared for that project. Say, I think this project is deficient and isn't adequate because on page such and such of the EIR, it says that there's a traffic impact at this intersection, or that, on vehicle miles traveled. Provide the exact, citation to the environmental impact report. Certainly, you can always provide comments to just say, oh, I don't like the project, or I love the project, or, I don't know why we're, doing a project that's so large. If you get specific with your comments and cite either the general plan policies or the analysis in the environmental impact report, that carries great weight. It requires that those comments be addressed, and it requires an analysis of that comment. It requires that myself or the consultant or whoever's reviewing that environmental impact report, that they have to respond to that comment. And if your comment is specific, then the response has to be specific as well. And say, oh, well, you know, we did analyze this in the traffic study, it's on page such and such, and this is a less than significant impact because of this reason. But that's really my, you know, my coaching to all of you on whether you like a project or don't like a project. Certainly use the general plan as your guide to compare a project to. Certainly use the environmental impact report that was prepared as your evidence to whether you are for something or against something. Don't allow somebody, you know, sitting in my seat or the consultant or anyone else to dismiss a comment just because it's, you know, general and or vague. You can provide those comments for sure, and those all add weight. If you just don't like a project and you want to send in an email and say, hey, I don't like this project, I don't think that this is a good fit for this parcel, that's totally fine. But, you know, I always tell members of the community, make us do our work. Make us respond. Make us be specific. Make us be science-based. Make us respond to a scientific question with a scientific answer. And so it's those types of questions that a lot of times either will stop a project from being approved, or we'll get a project approved. So that's really my advice to everyone in this room when you're, you know, reviewing a project and whether you're deciding like what should my comments say here going to the Board of Supervisors. Hey, be specific. Make us address your comment. And so, you know, put us on the line, so to speak. And so that's really my advice to. Oh. Yeah.
I have been hearing for maybe a couple of years about Costco going into El Dorado County around the El Dorado Hills area or just above it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you comment on that?
I can. The project is called EDH 52. It's right in the sliver parcel that is on Silva Valley Parkway. It's kind of down in a gully area. If you're coming down the hill and you pass the Silva Valley interchange, just as you pass it off to the right, there's kind of a sliver parcel there. Costco is interested in putting a Costco there. I believe that they are drafting the environmental impact report right now.
Is El Dorado County interested?
Again, I don't get an opinion on that. Like we'll process the project. Whether the community comes out in support or against it is yet to be seen. I'm sure there'll be a mix of both with a Costco. Some will be for it.
Pretty open area there right now, isn't it?
It is. Yes. There's also, I believe, some parcels up the hill from it that they might be proposing other uses, like I believe office uses. Medical offices. I'm not positive, but they are interested. I believe they are drafting an environmental impact report. I think the notice of preparation went out in the past, and now they're to drafting the document. Again, large-scale developments like that sometimes get put on hold. Sometimes they're going, you know, full speed. So certainly be using that project app on the Planning Services website, and there should be an icon down there for EDH 52, and click on it and see what the status is. And but I believe that they are interested, and I believe that project is being processed. Whether it will be approved or not, or in what fashion, I don't know. Ma'am in the back.
Yes, sir. Is there a formal process to review past projects that were totally aligned with code, but through the years, businesses have grown up around them, and now the conditions have really changed compared to when they were installed. And what I'm thinking about, just in concrete, is the car racing that goes on by the fairgrounds. Because that noise penetrates the entire area on Friday and Saturday nights, and it was fine, I'm sure, when there was no one around, and now, of course, the city's grown up around here. So I just wondered if there's a way, a formal process that can be initiated, and how do you initiate that, to perhaps review past decisions that were quite appropriate.
You know, it really comes down to how that project was approved in the past, and or whether it is just considered as part of the operations of the fairgrounds, and how the fairgrounds was approved as well, or whether the fairgrounds is just considered a county-owned property and thus not subject to the zoning code. You know, so it really depends on how that was approved. I will say that when a project is approved, if it's a discretionary action, that the project is just held to the conditions of approval at that time, whatever those are, and or mitigation measures that are in the CEQA document that are also included. You know, if they have to do acoustical noise studies periodically to make sure they're under the decibel level, that would be one thing where they would have to be monitoring that, and that could be enforced. I have a feeling that knowing the age of the fairgrounds and the operations of the fairgrounds, that they're in a what would be, you know, kind of considered a quote-unquote grandfathered in scenario. But I absolutely hear what you're saying, because I live off of Mother Lode over here, and I can hear it on Saturday night. So it's your comment is very relevant. But I don't know the exact particulars, but on a normal project, they would just be subject to those conditions of approval. On a modern day project such as that, if there were outdoor noise generating sources, there would be some kind of noise mitigation measure or a condition of approval that they test, and that they test their audio system, that they stay under a certain decibel level. But I have a feeling with the age of the fairgrounds and the age of the racing that's gone on there, that it was just approved way back in the day, and they're just operating under that approval.
So would that original plan be online, or would it be a library I go to get it to review?
It would be it could be a request to the planning department to see. You could put that request in to the planning services, just call the main planning line and say, I want to know what past approval documents there are for the raceway. They could have gotten a special use permit at the time. That's what they used to call it. Now we call it a conditional use permit, but back in the day it would have been called a special use permit. So there could be some things on the books that they need to do that they aren't doing. But that would be, you could request that from the planning to at least do some research on it and find out. If you want to, I have my business cards up there. If you want to shoot me an email, I will look into it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to see, because that's a very interesting one. I have a feeling that it's just so much age on it that there's no documentation. Yeah.
But I would think the general plan would be a living document, not the Dead Sea Scroll.
Right, and it is definitely a living document. It's just, you have to adhere to the rules that are put in place at the time, unfortunately, is what it comes down to. But there could be some things that they need to do. Yeah. You're going to make me the bad guy to the fairgrounds is what you're going to make me. Like, I'm going to be the county employee that shuts down the raceway. But I will look into it, because that's an interesting one. Yes, sir?
Yes. Do you have status on the park at Bass Lake?
I do. They are preparing the EIR right now. and they have decided to prepare a full-blown environmental impact report. I don't know exactly where the environmental impact report is. I know the notice of preparation went out. I believe that they're drafting the admin draft right now. I do not believe that that draft EIR is on the street yet, but certainly something to call that to the Community Services District. They have their own website. It's their own projects, and they would have an update there. But I believe that they are in administrative draft preparation of that document. So they're moving forward with it, but it's a full-blown environmental impact report. So they are acting as if, well, they would be subject to our zoning code because they're not us, yeah. So I'm sure I will be the one that's reviewing their EIR when it's ready and providing comments. We would be considered what's called a responsible agency in that effect, where they're the lead agency and we're the responsible, but we will be providing comments, and we will be taking a hard look at their traffic study. We'll be taking a hard look at their noise study, making sure that all of those things were prepared by qualified professionals and that we are in concurrence with the findings of that document. But I believe that is moving forward. But check their website. That is one project that wouldn't be on our planning services app, I don't believe, because they are a separate entity. So.
We have time for one more question, Mark.
No.
Okay.
The racetrack is like the airport that will be we're built out way from the towns, and then people build their houses, and it's too noisy.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's the thing. When it comes down to CEQA, it's the existing environment at the time. So it would have been that new development that comes in that had to analyze the impacts on their residences. So yeah.
And I think the state is going to mandate some housing right by railings and racetrack too.
It's called the Armory, and it's right there. It's where the old National Guard Armory was, and the city does have a proposed project. Yeah. Anything else at all? In the back, go ahead.
I'm kind of new to this county, but I know there's Four Seasons and Black or something like that. Smaller homes being built for seniors, I mean for people who just one person or maybe two persons, but there's a lot of large homes, I know, a lot of ones, but
I know that
a smaller home or a duplex or something like that.
I know that a lot of the new developments that are coming in propose a mix of housing and a mix like apartments with smaller cottage-style homes and then with larger single-style homes. So I think the newer developments do include that. It's really the older developments that have been building out are kind of the old metric of, single-family residential. Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it.